2020 presidential election coverage starts now. So this is the national 538 forecast, and not a lot has changed between this and the last video I did. So if you've already seen these, there's no real need to see this. But if you're new to this, then this will be exciting. And what it does here is it shows a series of Trump paths to victory up here. You can see this is what the Trump victories look like, and the Biden paths to victory are around here. And so it shows a series of scenarios. It says here Biden's favored to win the election. This was updated only 2 hours ago. And so you can see this model here. It says Biden is favored to win the election. And they simulated 40,000 times, given the poll data, to see who wins most often. And the sample of 100 outcomes given below gives you a good idea of the range of scenarios that their model thinks are possible. So these are all samples. And the red dots give you maps which show Trump victories, and you can see closer to this line on 270 are the victories where Trump wins just by a little bit over 270. And obviously, as you go to the extremes, these are extreme Trump victories. Here, Trump wins with 362 electoral college votes versus over here he's winning at 270 or 282. Equally, Biden's victory, his narrow victories are over here, and you can see him winning at 279, 287, 284 to Trump, to Trump's 254, etc. And then his extreme scenarios where he really runs the board sort of toward the edges. So what you really want to pay attention to, if you're trying to win, you're not necessarily trying to run the whole board, but whichever side you're trying to win, you're trying to at least gun for these scenarios here if you're Republican, and for these scenarios here if you're Democrat. So you can just pause the video on any of these scenarios and take a look at what Trump victories versus Democrat victories would look like. And you can see there are certain states which sort of flip over. In the Trump victories, Trump's claiming increasingly more and more of that sort of Rust Belt, versus the Biden victories, he's secured the Rust Belt, he's got the Northeast, and he's got the West Coast. And so that's what they look like. Let's move on to the next graph here. It shows every outcome in their simulation, so all possible electoral college outcomes for each candidate, with higher bars showing outcomes that appeared more often in our 40,000 simulations. Trump's has some likely losses over here, and he has some less likely wins over here, according to their model, and they have a smooth rolling average there. So he's, if he wins, he's tipped to win between 270 and 396-ish votes, whereas Biden, his losses are less likely, and his wins are more likely, i.e. Scenarios where he ends up with more than 270 electoral college votes. His most likely scenario actually appears here at around 400 and something electoral college votes, so it's about 410 or something. So that's and as you can see, there's more of a probability distribution that he gets over that 270. This is according to the 538 models. I know some of you trust them, some of you don't, but what you can say about their models is they are actually looking at the poll data and building models off of that. And then there's a question about how much you trust that poll data. But the winding path to victory, great graph here. States that are forecasted to vote for one candidate by a big margin are at the ends of the paths, here and here, and whereas the tighter races are in the middle. Bigger segments mean more electoral college votes are allocated to that state, so you can trace the path from either end to see which state could put one candidate over the top. And you can see here, Trump's most Trumpian state, you could say, with 72.4% of the population voting Trump, is Nebraska's 3rd district, followed up by Wyoming, etc. And Biden's strongest district is the District of Columbia, with 90.7% in favor for Biden. And then Vermont with 66.3% in favor for Biden. And so you have this winding path to victory. You can see that Trump's big electoral college base is here in Texas. Biden's big electoral college bases here in California, New York, Illinois, Virginia. Trump is Texas, Tennessee, and Ohio and Georgia. Get him a lot of the way there. And then the contested races are right here. This is what's really important. If you are campaigning, whether you're a Democrat or you're a Republican, you would want to focus on these races here, because these are the ones where, if they go Democrat, as it's showing in this model, that would mean a Democrat victory. Whereas if they go Republican, that could lead to a Republican victory. And you wouldn't want to focus, if you're a Democrat, on states like this, because they're 72% Trump. You'd have to convince 50% of the population to change their vote. Equally, if you're a Republican, you wouldn't want to try to overturn Vermont, where there's a 35% differential, because now you got over a third of the population. You've got to get them to change their vote. So it's here that you're really going to be campaigning. And so the Democrat path looks something like, they've got Wisconsin with 52.5% for Biden against 46.5% for Trump. They then get Pennsylvania with 51.9% for Biden against 47.4% for Trump for forecasted vote share. They then get Arizona, 51.1% for Biden against 47.6% for Trump. They get Nebraska's 2nd district. Bizarrely, the 3rd is the most Trumpian district. The 2nd is actually Democrat, with 50.4% for Biden against 48.2% for Trump. They then capture Florida with 50.5% of the popular vote for Biden against 48.7% for Trump. And then they capture North Carolina with 49.8% for Biden against 49.4% for Trump. If you support the poll data as it is, and you think that between now and the election it will not track toward Trump, that polling data, and you believe it will at least stay the same for Biden, or maybe grow for Biden, but that it won't track to Trump, then this is the scenario you're looking at with the poll data as it stands right now. You're looking at the 270 surpassed, with Pennsylvania's 20 electoral votes, Arizona's 11, Nebraska's 1, Florida's 29, and North Carolina's 15. So that's your path to victory. Ohio, Trump's sitting 1% ahead of Biden. So if you're a Democrat, you might be saying, well, you could overturn that if you first of all believe the poll data, and secondly, you can grab that 1% of the population, get it on side. Maine 2nd, 51.1% for Trump against 48.9% for Biden. You might be looking at targeting that state. 51% for Trump, 48.2% for Biden. In Georgia, you might be targeting Georgia as well. Finally, Iowa with 51.1% for Trump and Biden's 47.5%, you might be targeting. If you're a Republican, on the other hand, you're looking to maintain Iowa, Georgia, Maine 2nd district, and Ohio, which would mean that you're campaigning there to keep the totals that you have, where Trump is ahead. You'd also be looking at North Carolina, looking to overturn that. It's forecasted actually 0.4%, which I think is narrowed. There's a 0.4% difference between Trump and Biden. Trump's at 49.4, Biden's at 49.8. So if you're a Republican, you're thinking, well, how do I rile up 0.4% of the population to win North Carolina and convince them that Biden's not the right choice for them? Florida, Trump is, what is he, 1.3 plus, so 1.8% away from Biden. And so if you're a Republican, you're thinking probably something like, get the Hispanics on side and hope that there is that silent vote. And also, talk about your opponent in Florida so that you can change the actual forecasted vote share according to the polls between now and election. That itself can change as well, just by campaigning there. So Nebraska's 2nd, you've got Trump at 48.2% against Biden's 50.4%. So that's about a 1.8% difference. And so, let's see, sorry, 1.8. Sorry, 2.2% difference. So you could overturn that. I mean, the case there would be Nebraska's 3rd district is already so heavily pro-Trump that you could bring some of those guys in, have them talk about why they are, etc. Arizona, 47.6% for Trump against 51.1% for Biden. A swing state. I think Arizona, it appears like it's tipping Democrat pretty strongly now. So you might skip Arizona and move on to Pennsylvania, a Rust Belt state, make that Rust Belt case for Trump. Trump's at 47.4 against Biden's 51.9, so there's a bit of a difference here. I think Trump's strong in the rural areas in Pennsylvania, Biden's strong in the urban areas, so you might want to go to the urban areas and try to make your case. Wisconsin, recently some riots, you might make a case on that. Trump's at 46.5% against Biden's 52.5%, so that's a little bit further away, according to the polls where they currently stand. You're sitting at around 8% away. New Hampshire, Trump's at 46.4 against Biden's 52.5. So these are getting harder. Here you're sort of 6% away. Nevada, you are 6% away. And Minnesota, 6% away. Michigan, 6% away. So it's these Rust Belt states. If you could grab them, you wouldn't even need. If you could grab Florida and these Rust Belt states here, you wouldn't even need Arizona necessarily, Pennsylvania, or even North Carolina. Colorado is probably going to go Democrat. Maine, yeah. So I think up to Michigan is where you would be targeting. You'd be looking at North Carolina, Florida, Nebraska 2nd District, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, New Hampshire, Nevada, Minnesota, and Michigan. That's where Trump would be campaigning, as well as holding Ohio, Maine 2nd, Georgia, and Iowa. Biden's sitting in a very comfortable place right now, and I think he would be looking at holding all of these states. So again, campaigning in exactly the same states Trump is, as well as maybe trying to cut into Trump's command here in Ohio, Georgia, and Iowa. And I think Democrats are going pretty hard after Texas, but this is a massive state, so way more votes, way harder to overturn 3%. There's way more people in that 3% in Texas, and there is that 3% difference. South Carolina, that's an 8% difference, so that wouldn't even be on the cards, I think. So it's up to Texas for the Democrats. Hold all this and then try to gain all of that. So that's what the election looks like. It doesn't take you don't need an election campaigner to work this out. This graph shows it to you pretty clearly. So I think that's a beautiful graph. Here they have how the forecast has changed. The forecast updates at least once a day, and whenever we get a new poll, click the buttons to see the way in which each candidate's outlook has changed over time. And so you can see here the chances of winning. Biden was sitting at 71 and 100 against 30 and 100 for Trump on June 1st, and now Biden's sitting at 75 and 100 against Trump's 24 and 100. So it looks like Biden's chances have risen and Trump's chances have fallen, according to their forecast, which involves their analysis of that poll data. Electoral votes, Biden was tipped for 323 Electoral College votes if you take the poll data as it is against Donald Trump's 215, and that's since moved to 328 for Biden against Donald Trump's 210. And it says 80% of the outcomes fall in this range, so this blue range is the range that Biden has sort of in their model. So at this point, let's say in their model, they expect Biden to win 330 Electoral College votes, but there's an 80% chance that he can get as high as 420 and as low as 200. You need 270 to win. In the case where he gets 200, even according to this estimate at 330, there's therefore is a case that the Republican would then get whatever it is, 300 and whatever it was, right? So that would be how that works out. Currently, Biden's sitting at 328 with a low end at 200 and a high end of 420. Trump sitting at 210 with a high end of about 330 in their model and a low end of about 100 Electoral College votes. And then in terms of the popular vote, same old dynamics apply. On June 1st, Biden was expected to get about 52.5% of the popular vote against Donald Trump's 46.2% of the popular vote. And currently Biden's sitting at 52.7% of the popular vote against Donald Trump's 46%. So again, his expectation over that time period has basically stayed the same. You could say it's risen slightly, but it rose, it fell, etc. So that's how the forecast has changed in terms of the popular vote. There's the electoral votes, and there's the chance of winning. And then here it's got a nice little card on weird and not so weird possibilities. They've obviously examined a wide range of possibilities, and so they've highlighted some interesting situations, and they give the chances that these situations will crop up. Trump winning the popular vote, regardless of whether he wins the Electoral College, they say that's a 14 in 100 chance that Trump wins the popular vote, regardless of whether he wins the Electoral College. Biden winning the popular vote, regardless of whether he wins the Electoral College, they have an 86 in 100 chance. Trump winning more than 50% of the popular vote, regardless of whether he wins the Electoral College, is a 10 in 100 chance. Biden winning more than 50% of the popular vote, regardless of whether he wins the Electoral College, is an 81 in 100 chance. Trump winning in a landslide, defined as winning the popular vote by a double-digit margin, according to their model, is less than 1 in 100 chance. And Biden winning in a landslide, according to their model, defined as winning the popular vote by a double-digit margin, is 30 in 100 chance. Trump winning the popular vote but losing the Electoral College is less than 1 in 100 chance. So if he, wins the Electoral College, if he wins the popular vote, then he's unlikely to lose the Electoral College. And Biden winning the popular vote but losing the Electoral College is an 11 and 100% chance. So Biden can technically win the popular vote like Hillary did, but lose the Electoral College. No one winning the Electoral College, so no candidate getting 270 electoral votes in Congress, and Congress deciding the election is a less than 1 in 100 chance. Trump winning at least one state that Clinton won in 2016 is a 39 in 100 chance. And Biden winning at least one state that Trump won in 2016 is a 91 in 100 chance. So they forecast that all those red states in the 2016 election, at least one of them is going to end up going to Biden. So Trump's base states themselves are a little bit more rocky than Biden's base states. The map staying exactly the same as it was in 2016, with each candidate winning exactly the same states that his party won in 2016 is less than 100 chance, which speaks to the fact that the election has changed between 2016 and now, and the election hinging on a recount, where candidates are within half a percentage point or more in decisive states, is 5 in 100 chance. So there's a 5 in 100 chance that the election hinges on a recount. And I mean, if you watch the news, people are talking about that these days. People think it may well actually hinge on a recount. Now, who's ahead in the national polls? Their model relies on state polls, which it combines with demographic, economic, and other data to forecast what will happen on election day. If you want to see a snapshot of what voters are thinking right now, with no fancy modeling, check out their national polls. And then here are the closest races. So again, these are states which are going to be up for grabs and hotly contested in the coming sort of 49 days that we have. North Carolina, Ohio, Florida, Georgia, Arizona, Iowa, Texas, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Those are the states with the closest races. So, and that's the 538 2020 forecast. It's its most updated version, and hopefully you enjoyed it. You found it interesting. You thought, you got some idea of the states that your party needs to pay attention to, and if you did, give it a like, give it a follow, give it a subscribe, and thanks for watching.